Night had swallowed the plane by the time he finished chaining the corral gate. Jacob Shaw moved through the dark without lantern. He'd walked these yards for a decade of moons and knew every knot in every board. The barn loomed, door slightly ajar. Odd, because he'd latched it at dusk. Wind, he thought, yet his hand closed over the revolver butt as he slipped inside. Hay scent wrapped him. Damp earth coolness rose from the floor. He listened, counting breaths, caught one that wasn't his or the mare's. A faint scrape, then stillness. He eased around the stall, saw her crouch between bales, coat torn, face a pale smudge framed by loose hair. Gunmetal glimmered in her fist but lowered when she met his eyes. He kept his voice low, steady as reservoir water. "Barn's warmer than open sky. You hurt?" "Just tired." Her whisper shook like frost-cracked glass. "I'll go at first light." He stepped back, holstered the Colt. "Water's by the post. Leave the cup if you leave." She didn't thank him. Thirst swallowed courtesy. She drank deep, shoulders quivering. Shaw returned to the yard, barred the door against coyotes, then paused. A mare wouldn't rest with fear in the rafters. Neither would he. He went to the house, ladled bean soup into a tin, tore half a loaf, filled a blanket roll. When he re-entered the barn, she had retreated further into shadow, yet the revolver lay on the straw beside her, unfired, an offering. He set the bundle 2 steps away, not pushing it into her reach. "Cold ride ahead," he said. "Eat." Moonlight found a line of freckles across her cheeks, half hidden beneath dirt. She looked 19, maybe 20, but her eyes had walked farther than her boots. She lifted the tin, inhaled steam like it might burn grief away, then drank in slow, wary sips. When she finished, he took the empty cup, left the blanket, and locked the barn from outside. Not to trap her, but to keep danger out. Wind rose before dawn, rattling shutters. Shaw sat at the kitchen table, sharpening a chisel, ears tuned to hoofbeats that never came. When first gray scraped the horizon, he crossed to the barn. She was gone. Blanket folded, spoon washed, revolver missing. But on the hay bale lay a badge. Bright silver star, Sheriff's Office of Dry Hollow County. A line of blood dotted the tin point. Shaw turned the badge over. Scarlet Archer etched along the back rim. The sheriff's daughter, rumored dead after last month's riot. Posters said armed, traitorous, wanted for obstruction of justice. Offered $200 in gold. Dry Hollow sat 30 miles east. Every spur line whistled her name. He stored the badge in his coat pocket and rode fence at sunrise. Eyes always east. Around noon, he found her tracks along the creek. Barefoot impressions beside a discarded boot sole sliced through at the heel. He dismounted, studied the limp of her stride, the increasing blood droplets. She wasn't fleeing. She was bleeding out of hope. He followed slowly, letting chance drink at each bend. 3 miles on, willow branches quivered where no wind stirred. He halted. "Scarlet Archer," he called softly. "You drop something shines." Silence, then the faint metallic buzz of a revolver cylinder. Empty chambers spinning. She stepped out, face whiter, coat sleeve soaked. Bullet graze at the shoulder, old, reopened. The revolver shook useless in her grip. Cylinder showed only dry strike marks. Shaw tossed the badge toward her feet. "Figure you want people to think you still carry it." She picked it up, thumb brushing the star point with something like apology. "They hung him because he gave me the badge," she said, voice cracked. "Tried to name me deputy. Town called it treason. I ran before they finished the rope." A lone hawk keened overhead. Shaw watched it ride thermals. "Rope's long," he said, "but land's longer." He cut strips from his flannel, bound her shoulder tight, soaked cloth in creek water. She winced but didn't pull away. He led her back to Sunrise Bend under late sun. Wren greeted them, baby on hip, assessing wound with quick frontier eyes. No questions. She melted lard with pine pitch, pressed it over the torn flesh. Eli fetched fresh water, goat trailing. Scarlet watched the boy count his steps. Safe world she'd thought fable. Night brought prairie silence. Inside, Scarlet sat at the long table where Caleb's saddlestone served as candleweight. Shaw set bread, salt, and his Colt between them. "Eat, then talk," he said. She tore small bites, training one eye on the weapon, one on the shadows beyond the window board. She spoke between swallows, how Sheriff Archer tried to stop a posse from burning migrant tents, how mob justice turned badge into warrant, daughter into fugitive. She ended with a whisper, "I'm nobody's law." Shaw answered, "Badge never made the man." Storm clouds rolled by midnight, thunder distant as old regrets. Scarlet dozed by the hearth, Badge clutched like a dying ember. Shaw carried her to the spare cot, covered her with the same blanket she'd folded. At dawn, rain washed dust from the porch roof. She woke to Lark's laugh, new and fearless. She watched Shaw mend tack, Wren rock the baby, Eli teaching Ruth goat hurdle games. Hush of belonging seeped into her ribs, harder to shake than chill. At noon she approached the barn, laid her empty revolver on the same bale, and set the badge atop. "No more silver targets," she said. Shaw lifted the star, pinned it on the barn post beside an old brass button and a cracked pocket watch. "Stories stay," he told her. "People choose if they ride on." Wind smelled of wet earth, as though land exhaled relief. Scarlet touched the nailed badge once, then turned toward the house where stew simmered. "Supper needs hands," Wren called through the doorway. Scarlet stepped over the threshold, coat stained, eyes clearing. Outside, storm clouds drifted east, toward a town still hunting ghosts. Inside, a new chair waited at the table, empty only until she sat. Crickets etched quiet along rafters, counting futures instead of fugitives. Before dawn, Scarlet was already outside, bare feet cool on dew-slick dirt. She walked the fence line with slow, testing steps, confirming the hush of Sunrise Bend was real and she was still alive inside it. A low fog lay in the pasture, curling around Chance's legs as the roan nosed for grass. Overhead, the first lark called daylight into being. The sound tightened Scarlet's throat with something that felt like grief wearing Hope's borrowed coat. Jack watched from the porch, mug steaming against his palms. He'd heard her slip out, but let her have the distance. When she turned back, he raised 2 fingers in greeting. She answered with the faintest lift of her chin. Shy contract between fugitives who no longer ran alone. Inside, Wren stirred cornmeal into boiling water, while baby Ash dozed against her shoulder. The kitchen smelled of wood smoke and wild honey. Scarlet entered softly, offered to grind chicory, unsure if the offer outweighed the history on her name. Wren nodded thanks, then added, almost casual, "Deputy Stone rides out at first light. She can carry word you're safe." Scarlet's hands paused over the grinder, pulse skittering. "Safe isn't legal," she murmured. Mid-morning brought Stone at a trot, arms still bound from the creek ambush weeks earlier. She dismounted, eyes sweeping the yard for threats. Scarlet waited by the barn, spine straight. Stone studied her face. The same wanted poster features, but drawn now with exhaustion rather than defiance. "Dry Hollow's council voted a bounty," Stone said, voice flat. $200. Alive for trial. Dead brings questions nobody wants. She flicked reins over the rail. "They're hiring drifters with nothing to lose." Jack led Stone to the kitchen. Lark and Eli whispered over a slate, drawing a badge inside a heart. Child logic stitching wounds adults barely touched. Stone laid out a folded map, marking creek bends and cattle tracks. "If riders come," she said, "they'll follow water and wire. Fastest lines." Jack traced alternative angles. Wren filled mugs, steady even as her fingers brushed the map's red trails. Scarlet stood apart, gaze fixed on the nail where her empty revolver hung beside the badge she'd relinquished. She listened without comment until Stone addressed her directly. "You could ride before they reach here," Stone suggested, tone not unkind. "Disappear south where posters fade." "I ran out of road," Scarlet answered. She touched her healing shoulder. "Running breaks things nobody sees." Afternoon heat crept in. Jack and Stone rode the perimeter, leaving Clara in charge of drill. Ruth positioned water barrels along the porch. Eli scattered damp sand at choke points. Wren cleaned the sharps with deliberate strokes. Scarlet wrapped her right arm despite stiffness, then practiced loading shells one-handed into the borrowed scattergun. Preparations fell into place like prayer beads counted in silence. At sunset, a dust plume lifted on the eastern horizon. 6, maybe 7 riders. silhouettes ragged but swift. Clara rang Eden's small bell once. Every heart in Sunrise Bend shifted gears. Scarlett took her post in the orchard's first row, back to the apple trunk. Wren crouched behind the porch rail, Ash strapped to her chest, ear kisses soothing him to calm. Jack and Stone dismounted beyond the granary, rifles leveled over a barrel rest. The riders halted 50 yards out. Their spokesman wore a deputy's star cut from tin, not official, but bright enough to fool a distant eye. He lifted a hand, calling, "We claim the dry hollow fugitive. Turn her out and no harm touches the roof." His accent carried saloon dust and whiskey bite. The others flanked him, guns easy in their grips. Jack answered, even-keeled, "We host no criminal, only weary travelers." Tin Star Man laughed. "Poster reads, Scarlet Archer, traitor, obstruction, armed. Bounty's gold, friend? Step aside." He spurred forward 2 paces. "Last offer." From the orchard, Scarlet stepped into view, scattergun down but ready. "Your rope snapped once," she called, voice rolling steady across the brittle air. "Try it again, and you'll choke on splinters." The riders shifted, unsure how a ghost could stand breathing. Tin Star smirked, flicked a hand. 2 men angled right toward the creek. Ruth loosed the nanny goat into their horse's path. The startled animals reared, giving Stone clean sight. Her carbine barked, splintering the brim off one rider's hat, hissing warning more than wound. The man wheeled away, cursing. On the left flank, Clara tipped a rain barrel, water flooding dust into slick mud. One horse skidded, throwing its rider. Scarlet advanced, muzzle leveled. The downed man froze, eyes wide. Tin Star raised his revolver toward Jack. 2 reports thundered almost in the same breath, Jack's sharps and Scarlet's scattergun. Tin Star's weapon flew from his hand, bullets spinning it mid-air before it thudded harmless to ground. His boot slipped, he fell, clutched a shoulder now wet with spreading crimson. Silence rang louder than gunfire. Remaining riders backed their mounts, watching leader bleed. Stone stepped forward. "Haul him home alive," she ordered. "Tell Dry Hollow the badge they worship is nailed to a good wall, and the law they twist won't reach farther than their fears." The drifters obeyed, dragging Tin Star onto a horse, galloping east, dust fading to nothingness. Scarlet exhaled. The air tasted electric, like sky seconds after lightning. Her knees shook but didn't fold. Wren walked over, baby at her shoulder, eyes shimmering relief. She placed a hand on Scarlet's good arm. "Supper waits," she said simply. Night settled gentle. Fireflies blinked beyond the porch while supper steam curled off bowls of stew. Scarlet sat at the table's far end. Jack lifted a tin cup. "Place was yours when you chose not to run," he said, voice soft. Eli raised his slate, showing a fresh drawing. The nailed-up badge, now surrounded by 5 small stars, each named for the household. Scarlet's eyes burned. She reached, took the slate, pressed her thumb over her drawn star, smudging it just enough to fuse lines with the others. "Not sheriff's daughter tonight," she whispered. "Just Scarlet. Just home." Wind rattled the cedar board, scar over scar, but nothing else threatened. Outside, crickets resumed their numbers. This time Eli counted out loud, voice carrying into the darkness without fear, sounding almost like a hymn. The summer sun rose fierce and white, burning off the last night's dew before it had time to glisten. Sunrise Bend stirred early. Clara lifted water in a yoke across her shoulders. Ruth forked hay into the mule's trough, while Eli practiced silent counts, testing how high he could whisper before scaring the larks. In the orchard, Scarlet trimmed shoots from around the apple's trunk, each snip a measured breath, until the tree stood clean and the saddle stone caught the full light of morning. Jack returned from the pasture with 3 strays herded ahead of Chance. He'd followed their tracks all the way to the ravine where Tin Star's riders had fled, but found only cigarette ends and a scrap of boot heel. No signs they'd risk another try. The quiet felt deeper for that knowledge. Still, he kept one hand near the colt as he swung from the saddle. By noon, Deputy Stone rode in with news that sat heavy and bright at once. "Dry Hollow Council collapsed," she said, dropping a folded broadsheet on the porch table. "Sheriff's seat stripped, bounty rescinded, federal circuit judge rides to open inquiry." Scarlet touched the headline, Heresy of the Noose. eyes widening at the stark type. Below, a list of names waited summons. Hers came last, inked in cautious italics. Ms. Scarlett Archer, erstwhile deputy by appointment. Wind shifted through the porch rafters, carrying orchard scent. They want testimony, Stone added. Truth this time, not posters. Wren laid a hand on Scarlett's wrist. Justice chases slow but sure. Scarlett shook her head. I step into that courtroom. They'll still see a rope, not a witness. Jack unpinned the cracked pocket watch from the story post, placed it before her. Time's been mended here. You can mend it there. The room fell quiet except for ash gurgling against Wren's shoulder. A small sound, yet weighty as any verdict. Scarlett exhaled, rolled her shoulders back. If I go, I ride for truth, not chains. Stone nodded, relief flickering. Train leaves Dalton at dawn. I'll escort. Evening painted the barn gold. Scarlett packed lightly. One change of linen, the badge she'd disowned, the empty revolver as silent exhibit. Clara slipped a folded parcel of cornbread into her satchel, fingers lingering. You come back, she said. Scarlett managed half a smile. Roads shorter to return than to flee. Eli offered his brass button, but she pressed it back into his palm. Hold it here, she whispered. I'll bring new luck to share. That night the household gathered under oil lamp glow. Ruth tuned Eden's harmonium, coaxing a lullaby that fluttered like moth wings. Jack sat whittling a sliver of cedar into a tiny star. When finished, he drilled a hole through its center, threaded it onto a length of the red ribbon. He tied it around Scarlett's neck above her pulse. Not Law's star, yours, he murmured. Sleep came shallow. Before dawn, Wren brewed chicory, thick as tar. Clara saddled the mare Scarlett would ride, adjusting girth with the care of a sister. Stone waited at the gate, coat buttoned high, twin colts glimmering. Pink washed the horizon as Scarlett mounted, star charm cool against sun-warmed skin. Jack walked beside the mare until the creek ford. Water slid silver over rocks, memory of the night they first met. Scarlett steadied the reins, looked down. If juries knew hush like yours, they'd judge kinder. Bring them a piece, he said. She nodded once, heels nudging the horse into the shallows. Stone followed. Spray caught first light, scattering diamonds into the air. Then they climbed the far bank and disappeared beyond cottonwoods. The ride to Dalton pressed hot and windless. At the depot, a lone locomotive hissed, black iron already radiating noon heat. Scarlett's heart hammered as she boarded the single-passenger car. Hard benches, curtains laced with coal dust. Stone sat opposite, hat over eyes, posture loose but ready. Miles clicked by, tracks drumming faint through wooden floorboards. Scarlett turned the badge in her hand, weight altering with every flash of sun. She remembered her father's voice appointing her deputy, how pride had felt both lighter and heavier than iron. She closed her fingers, breathed deep, and let the rhythm of rails summon courage. Dry Hollow appeared dusty brown and brittle, courthouse tower looming over adobe shops. Townsfolk paused to stare as Stone led Scarlett up the steps. Inside, the circuit judge, a gray-haired woman with iron spectacles, listened while lawyers bickered over procedure. When Scarlett took oath, the courtroom hushed, a collective inhale. She recounted everything, migrant tents burning, father unpinning his badge and fixing it on her coat, the mob's uproar, the shot that tore through Caleb Dawson, fleeing under gunfire to a stranger's barn. Her voice cracked once. Still, she finished without apology. The judge leaned forward. This court rules the deputy appointment lawful. Mob prosecution shall proceed. Ms. Archer, you are free, your badge restored if you desire. Scarlett lifted the star charm Jack had carved, the red ribbon gleaming. I carry my own star now, she said softly. Badge belongs on my father's grave. The judge nodded, gaveling closure. She rode back under evening clouds, Stone beside her, humming low. Near midnight sunrise, Ben's porch lamp glowed like a beacon. Eli ran first, goat trailing, wordless grin wide. Ruth stepped from the barn holding fresh-drawn water. Clara pulled Scarlett into a hug tighter than words allowed. Wren, baby in sling, offered the cradle-scarred hand of welcome. Jack stood at the rail, cedar star in his palm, waiting to retie the ribbon after Miles had frayed its knot. Scarlett dismounted, dust swirling off boots. She walked to the story post, hammered her father's real badge above the cracked watch and the brass button, not buried, but displayed among truths that had learned to breathe. Then she turned, took her place at the table where bowls steamed and chairs never stayed empty long. Outside, crickets counted beyond 100, beyond fear, into a measure only hush could hold. Dawn breathed pale lavender over Sunrise Bend, the light filtering through thin cloud as if reluctant to break the hush that settled after Scarlett's return. In the barn, the mare nickered softly, recognizing her rider's step. Scarlett brushed soot dust from the saddle that had carried her to Dry Hollow and back, letting slow strokes settle the mare's restless flank. Each creak of leather felt like proof that a journey had ended without loss. Wren appeared at the barn door. Ash nestled asleep against her chest and murmured that breakfast waited. Steam curled from the kitchen vent, promising cornbread and chicory, but Scarlett lingered a moment longer, palm flat on the horse's neck, until the animal's breath matched her own. At the table, Jack passed a pan of scrambled eggs to Eli, who had sprouted another inch since spring and looked proud of the way his sleeves rode higher on his wrists. Ruth recited tally of the garden rows: tomatoes setting fruit, beans climbing quick. Clara poured honey over Wren's cornbread slice. Extra sweetness, she said, for milk supply. Scarlett watched the rhythm and found her place without thought, filling Ash's bottle from the warm kettle before anyone asked. Later, Jack and Scarlett rode north to mend a gap where a storm-fallen cottonwood had crushed the top wire. Grasshoppers lifted like sparks as horses padded through high summer grass. Near the break, they found hoof prints and a coil of rope. Scarlett dismounted, tracing the prints with the back of her hand. "Heavy wagon turned here," she murmured, "but not ours." She followed the trail to a knoll and spotted flattened patches where barrels had rested. Jack planted a cedar post and stretched new wire, while Scarlett circled outward. She discovered an empty crate stamped Dry Hollow Tannery and a torn ledger sheet listing sulfur and saltpeter, components for gunpowder. The writing ended mid-line as if ripped. She folded the scrap, slid it inside her coat. "Someone stockpiles big noise," she said. They returned at dusk. Deputy Stone rode in minutes later, dust white, hat pulled low. She accepted water, then produced a telegram. A new marshal was arriving to take Dry Hollow's vacant badge and promised to clear fugitives still roaming the county. Stone's lips thinned. "Means riders who want to prove loyalty." Scarlett laid the ledger scrap beside the telegram. "Supply came through our creek pass." Jack studied both. "Can't guard every mile, but we can shorten roads." He traced a finger across the map, an old irrigation ditch that could be reopened to flood the wagon path. Next morning, the household moved like clock springs. Jack and Clara dug channels from the creek, redirecting water until it gurgled across wagon ruts. Ruth and Eli stacked willow hurdles downstream to back the flow. By noon, a shallow sheet spread over the low pass, ankle deep to horses, hub deep to wagons, slow enough not to harm pasture but sure to bog heavy wheels. That evening, thunderheads bloomed purple. Scarlett saddled her mare again and tied Caleb's saddlestone into the blanket roll. "I need to ride east," she told Jack. "Marshall must hear truth before poster ink dries anew." Jack didn't ask if she feared ambush. She carried the badge no longer pinned but clenched like a coin. "Take the cedar star," he said, slipping it into her palm. "Road's never straight." She rode under cloud, reaching the halfway relay shack by midnight. There she met Doctor, home tending a travel-sick prospector. Home lifted an eyebrow at the star charm, asked no questions, only offered coffee stronger than regret. After dawn, Scarlett found the marshal's column at Cedar Fork. 6 deputies, fresh uniforms, boots still city black. She rode forward, badge raised. The marshal halted his men, surprise flickering. Scarlett spoke briskly. Mob history, council collapse, hidden powder barrels. She handed him the torn ledger. His jaw set. He ordered 2 men to verify supply caches, thanked her for service still needed. His eyes dipped to her empty holster. "You ride unarmed?" She tapped the cedar star. "I ride with quieter steel." Meanwhile, at Sunrise Bend, waterlogged wagon wheels announced themselves. Ruth saw them first, rushed to ring Eden's bell. A single wagon, driver cursing as the mire-sucked spokes. Jack and Clara reached the bank. No rifles, just shovels. They smiled polite and offered boards for leverage. When the driver climbed down, boots sinking, Clara saw sulfur barrel edges under tarp. Jack tilted a shovel blade, glinting warning. The driver, reading more than hospitality in his eyes, backed away, stumbling. Ruth's goat bleated, startling horses. The wagon tipped, powder barrels rolling into brown water. A quick hiss rose as silt sealed dangerous seams. The driver deserted the rig, sprinted south. Jack let him go. Rain arrived in sheets that night, swelling the ditch enough to swallow the crates entirely. When Scarlett returned at first light, soaked and weary, she saw empty traces where barrels had been. She dismounted, touching the cedar star still hanging at her throat. "Marshall accepts the truth," she said. "He'll ride patrol along the spur line." Wren opened the door, ash blinking at dawn. Scarlett stepped inside, steam from the stove wrapping her like absolution. Jack hung her coat by the patched window and set a mug in her hands. Outside, water drummed steady, a lullaby for fields that needed deep drink. Later, when clouds thinned, Eli counted frog calls to 140 before losing track. He laughed, unashamed. Scarlett sat on the porch step carving her own talisman, a tiny wooden lark she planned to nail next to the sheriff's badge. Jack whittled cedar curls for kindling and watched her hands steady with each stroke. Quiet settled, not brittle, but tempered, like leather hardened by rain then oiled back to life. Inside, Wren rocked ash while humming a harvest hymn. Ruth mended reins. Clara kneaded bread dough, pressing grief into strength. Beyond the creek, the wagon still lay half submerged, powder useless as wet sand. Sunrose reeds nodded over it, hiding menace beneath green hush. Sunrise Bend had turned another threat to roots and water, just as the land always hoped. And somewhere down rail, a city black marshal, ready to report that would close the last bounty ledger, his ink drying slower than the prairie wind, but just as certain to fade. August brought a hushed, oven-hot stillness that even the cicadas seemed to respect. Wheat in the eastern field rattled like dry bones, and the creek, half a stride narrower every week, slid under its willow canopy with the resigned sigh of water that knows it will soon be memory. Sunrise Bend carried on, but each breath felt measured, as though the whole ranch were a lung conserving its last sweet draft. One dusk, Clara and Ruth dragged the water sled through the orchard, sloshing buckets over apple roots gone powder white. Scarlett knelt by the trunk, pressing 2 fingers into soil that once felt loamy. Dust sifted around her knuckles. She rose, ran a thumb over the wooden lark nailed beside her father's badge. The carving's edges had been darkened by sun already, but the tiny wings still curved upward, stubborn proof that slight things could defy heat. Jack watched from the gate, hand on Chance's bridle. He'd ridden north to check the ditch work, but returned with only dust on his coat and a crease between his brows. "Marshland is grass brittle," he said to Wren. "Herd won't last if rain waits another month." Wren adjusted ash on her hip, shook loose her braid, and answered in what had become the ranch's creed. "We root deeper." Night fell, air too heavy for lanterns. Eli lay on the porch counting shooting stars. Ruth read by moonlight the single dog-eared dime novel she still treasured, lips shaping each sentence like prayer. Inside, Clara arranged jars of dwindling pickles on the shelf, spacing them wider so emptiness wouldn't look so loud. Just after midnight, a low rumble rolled along the horizon. Not thunder, not train. Jack stepped outside, Colt loose in hand, and saw the silhouette of a freight wagon rocking slow along the far track. No lanterns, pulled by 2 mules whose heads drooped as though walking in sleep. At the reins sat a man in a wide straw hat, coat too large, posture too limp. Jack whistled once. Scarlett reached the barn door with the scattergun almost before the note faded. They advanced side by side, boots soft in dust. The wagon halted. The driver looked up, face gaunt beneath stubble. "Water," he croaked, voice cracked so deep the word nearly bled. "Cargo dying." Ruth emerged, curiosity a lantern no drought could quench. She and Clara lifted side tarps and inhaled a stench of damp burlap and fevered flesh. Inside, 8 sheep huddled, wool matted with sweat. One gave a faint bleat, another lay too still. A rust-colored smear striped the wagon floor. Stone had warned them that sickness followed drought the way vultures followed heat. Scarlet locked eyes with Wren across the yard, read the same fear. Fever among stock could burn through a ranch faster than wildfire through chaparral. They unloaded the sheep into the quarantine pen once built for bummers. Jack pumped creek water into the trough. What dribbled out was lukewarm, but the animals drank greedily. The stranger sagged against a post. Wren handed him a cup laced with willow bark. He drained it, collapsed to his knees, and whispered, "Name's Landers. Lost my wife 2 weeks back. Fever. Thought I could reach the railhead before flock failed me." Scarlet tested each sheep, feeling for heat under the jaw. One ewe burned like an ember. She met Jack's look. No words necessary. He led the sick one behind the barn, a single shot ending its rattle. The echo drifted over brittle grass and settled on empty sky. Through the thin hours, they sheared the remaining animals, scrubbed them with lye soap Clara rationed from their sparse stores. Ruth sang under her breath, a tune Eden once taught, to keep the fear from sounding louder than hoofbeats. When first light rimmed the mesas, steam rose off the pen like ghost breath, but no new coughs rattled the flock. They fed Landers broth, laid him in the granary's shade. Dr. Holmes, summoned by Stone's mirror flash, arrived late afternoon, coat already salt-streaked. She examined the sheep, nodded curt approval. No pox, only heat rot and neglect. "Rain in 48 hours, she predicted after sniffing the wind. No one asked how she knew, but hope cracked the drought-tight air. Before leaving, Holmes pulled Jack aside. "Marshall's patrol spotted dynamite crates gone from that flooded wagon. Someone fished them out downstream. Keep watch." Jack thanked her, pulse hitching once. After supper, Wren pressed Baby Ash's heel to ink and marked it on a strip of parchment tacked inside the doorframe. His growth recorded even while barley shrank. Clara braided Ruth's hair by lantern glow, fingers gentle despite the weariness clouding her eyes. Scarlet oiled the scattergun and checked the star charm for splinters. Near midnight, thunder finally grumbled from the west. Wind shoved hot air aside, replacing it with the metallic tang of charged sky. Jack stepped onto the porch as lightning stitched the black. A single fat drop struck the cedar plank, then another. Soon millions drummed rafters and churned dust to earth-scented mud. Eli whooped, dancing barefoot in puddles, rain plastering hair across his cheeks. Ruth joined him, goat bounding in delirious circles. Scarlet let the storm soak her, face tilted high. She tucked the cedar lark into her shirt, whispering thanks to whatever sky still cared enough to answer brittle prayers. Wren leaned against Jack, holding Ash so the child could taste rain on his tongue. Clara lifted her eyes, lips moving in silent memory of Caleb. Lightning lit the orchard and revealed a lone figure at the fence. Landers, hat dripping, hands clutching the post. He stared at the soaked grass as if unable to believe water could still fall. Jack walked over, draped a blanket across his shoulders. "Stay till flock's strong," he said. Landers nodded, words drowned by thunder, but gratitude shining plain. Come dawn, creek brimmed, bank full, carrying the last scraps of powder-marked crates downriver, where they would rot harmless under silt. Sheep bleated, restless but alive. Barley stalks straightened, drinking greedily. And in the high pasture, where no one had planted, fresh shoots of blue stem pushed through soil. Green where yesterday was only tan. Scarlet nailed the rain-darkened lark back onto the post, beneath the newly washed sheriff's badge. Water gleamed on the metal like forgiveness, catching sunrise in tiny mirrors. Behind her, Jack raised a mug of steaming chicory, lifted it in silent toast to a hush that had proven tougher than dust, stronger than fire, and resilient even against the long, slow hunger of drought. The prairie answered with quiet gratefulness and the faint, far rattle of a train heading elsewhere. Its noise carried, then faded, leaving only the steady drip of water from apple leaves, counting blessings for anyone patient enough to listen. If this quiet ride through Sunrise Bend left a footprint on you, hitch your support to the ranch, tap like, so the story drifts farther across the prairie of YouTube. Drop a comment, tell us which moment or character's quiet courage hit hardest, hit subscribe, and ring the bell to be at the table for the next tale of second chances, steady hearts, and the hush that heals.